Hi, I'm Karen Suarez, your host here today. We have the pleasure of meeting with John Harabedian. He's the mayor of Sierra Madre and running for LA County Supervisor. Welcome, John.
Karen, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Great, great. Well, you're running for two positions coming up in the local election for Central Committee and Supervisor. Tell us about
I
that.
am, which is confusing to voters. So for voters out there, I'm sorry for confusing you, but I am. I'm running for county supervisor, which is for the 5th district, which includes Sierra Madre, where I'm the mayor, Monrovia, Pasadena, all the foothills. It also includes the northern parts of the county, so Lancaster, Palmdale, Santa Clarita. And the county supervisor seat is very important. They oversee $36 billion of budgetary revenue and resources, everything from public hospitals to our DA's office, the sheriff, so public safety, transportation, everything. So it's an extremely, extremely important seat. I am the candidate who's endorsed by the Democratic Party, and we're running a very, very strong campaign, and we'll talk more about that. I'm also running for Central Committee. Central Committee is the elected positions for the LA County Democratic Party. So I'm running for both and asking for votes for both seats, actually, and they're not mutually exclusive. The county supervisor seat will come first on the ballot, and then the Central Committee will come after that.
So on the ballot, there is no designation if you're a Democrat or Republican. So the Central Committee race for the Democratic Party helps people know that you are the Democrat in the race.
That's true. Yes, I mean, there's one added benefit to running for both, which is I am trying to let all the voters know throughout the 5th district that I am the Democrat. And I am the Democrat that's endorsed by the party, but also Jerry Brown, Alex Padilla, and a lot of strong Democrats. The Central Committee helps with that, but I'm also making sure that folks know that this isn't just about getting a Democrat in there. It's about getting someone with our values and someone that's actually going to stand up for environmental protections, actually try to solve homelessness and protect those who are suffering from mental illness and drug addiction, and also make our county safer. Right now, we have a county that, under the current leadership, we haven't really done anything on criminal justice reform. And because of that, we have a lot of people who are currently incarcerated and filling up our jails and prisons that really shouldn't be there because they've done things really small little level crimes that are really a process of being infected by whether it's drug addiction or mental illness, and these people need help. What we've done is really not invested in mental health services. We, as part of the $36 billion budget, we invest less than $1 billion in mental health. And instead, we invest too much, I think, on enforcement and incarceration. So I think having a Democrat in there that's going to look out for those issues, as well as protecting our undocumented immigrants, as well as making sure that transportation and housing policy are sufficient to get people to and from work without killing our environment. And I think obviously homelessness is something that the current supervisor in this seat has not done a good job on. Instead of actually building the necessary affordable housing, protecting people in their homes with tenant rights, rent stabilization, she has voted to criminalize homelessness. She has voted to overturn Martin v. Boise, which is a case in the Ninth Circuit that basically says you cannot arrest people or criminalize the act of being poor or homeless until you've built all the necessary housing. And I think that we have to have someone in there that's going to hit the ground running day one. And as the mayor of Sierra Madre, I've dealt with all these issues. And I think I'm the best person for the job.
So what can you do that is different regarding the homeless? I mean, I've talked to people who believe that we need structures that are not being built in Los Angeles for a shelter.
I think what we need to do first is declare a state of emergency. I think we have a humanitarian crisis. I think we have a crisis that if it were caused by a hurricane, an earthquake, or any sort of natural disaster, we would have temporary shelters up tomorrow. We would be getting people medical assistance. We would actually have a community effort that would be unending until everyone was actually put in a bed and given what they needed, which is a shower, which is help. The problem is that we haven't declared a state of emergency, and what we're doing is treating this like a housing problem. But it's really not just a housing problem. It's a problem that deals with a lot of underlying issues. And I think those underlying issues we talked about a little bit, mental health, drug addiction, but also economic insecurity. And so after declaring a state of emergency, what I would do is actually incentivize current owners of multi-unit housing, which there's a lot. There's a lot of supply of housing throughout the county. I would incentivize them economically to start housing homeless families and those that are on the brink of homelessness. And I think that would be a very quick way of actually getting people into housing without having to build new buildings and new housing. But I think at the same time, we need to prioritize the building of permanent supportive housing. Housing throughout the county that's actually going to get people inside and off the streets, but to get them the medical care and the mental health care that they need. And so I think with that three-pronged approach, which is, again, declare a state of emergency, actually utilize existing housing stock, and then third, rapidly building that new housing stock, I think is really critical. And on that third piece, what we need is a real plan. And in my plan, what I would do is establish a housing czar in the county, which we don't currently have. We don't have anyone in the county whose sole purpose is to build affordable, permanent, supportive housing for our homeless populations. And right now, as you know, we have 60,000 people on the streets, many of them children, many of them are suffering from a lot of different ailments, and 3 of them are dying a day. So I'd have a housing czar that is solely focused on that. Secondly, I would establish a expedited housing unit, which basically makes sure that the red tape and the administrative burdens that are making it impossible for builders to actually build the necessary housing are wiped away. And I think what we need is we need efficiency, because I think what we've seen is $500,000 a unit, $600,000 a unit. A lot of that is because of the government bureaucracy, frankly, that is thrown up in front of people trying to actually build the housing that we need. And so I think taking away that red tape is a really good start. And I think if you do all those things, we're going to see the units actually being built and people coming off the streets.
Terrific, terrific. Well, also in the many circles I run in, the county is falling short on environmental standards. What would separate you from the current supervisor in environmental protection?
Well, I'm very proud to be endorsed by the LA League of Conservation Voters in this race, and I'm very proud of my track record on the environment. I'm a founding member of the Clean Power Alliance, which is a community collaborative aggregator that actually provides clean energy throughout LA County and Ventura counties, and it's one of the biggest providers of clean energy throughout the country. I think that what we need is a supervisor who prioritizes actually shutting down projects like Aliso Canyon and Chiquita Landfill. The current supervisor, one of the first acts that she did was to expand and increase the capacity of Chiquita Landfill, which is affecting those living near it in Castaic very, very detrimentally. It's hurting kids, it's making sure that their asthma is getting worse, it's actually polluting our air. And I think that you need a supervisor who's going to actually enforce the environmental laws very stringently. I think you need a supervisor that is not going to sit back while fossil fuel companies argue why sites like Aliso Canyon are safe when we see the detrimental effects on a daily basis. And I think that Aliso Canyon should have been shut down literally 4 years ago at this point. And it's still open, and the natural gas pollution is still affecting those in Porter Ranch and the surrounding areas. And I think that you need someone that's going to prioritize clean, sensible development. What you see now from the current supervisor is someone who has approved a development project called Tejon Ranch Centennial, which would add 20,000 units in an area of our district that is a high and extremely high fire risk zone. Also, it has habitats and wildlife that are going to be disrupted because of it, and there are zero resources there. There are no roads, there's no water, there's no public safety. So when there is a fire or there is an emergency, you're going to see a burden financially and otherwise on the rest of us. And I think that we need a supervisor that actually prioritizes infill smart development that's actually going to house people that need housing now, and not this regional sprawl that I think is just leading to more and more CO2, more and more climate change, and more negative impacts on our communities. And that's something that I'm going to focus on as soon as I get in there as a supervisor.
So what do we do with our trash? We have so much single-use plastic use, polystyrene. We're running out of landfill space. I think water and trash are the oil of the future that we're going to have issues with. What do we do?
It's a great point. I think that we need to support state legislation on banning single-use plastics. I think that we see other countries, China, for example, that is banning single-use plastic. If China can do it, the County of Los Angeles should be able to do it. We should have done it a long time ago. And we should be encouraging our state leaders who have tried already to ban it as well. And I think that's one step. I also think that we need to get very serious as government. As LA County, we employ over 200,000 people. And that is a huge buying and purchasing base. I think the county itself should stop using single-use plastics. And I think when it comes to solid waste on an individual level, I think that there has to be a following of the sustainability plan that the county came out with not too long ago, that is basically going to try to reduce our solid waste by 50% in the near future. And I think the only way that you do that is really from a consumer standpoint, demanding that producers of this solid waste, big companies, those that are selling tons of materials on Amazon and other sites, are actually doing it in a sustainable way. There's products that don't use plastic, that are actually bio-friendly, that produce products all the time. And we as consumers need to demand that. And I think you start with, as a supervisor, again, a lot of resources at your fingertips. And if you make a motion on day one saying we're no longer going to use single-use plastics, and our employees, who are, again, a very big block of the county, are no longer going to use them as employees and purchase them as employees, I think that's a great start. But I don't think that you're going to see any real change unless you get people on the board who don't take money from fossil fuel companies, who don't take money from landfill owners, who don't take money from trash haulers. And I'll tell you, the person that I'm running against takes money from all those people. And she takes money from a lot of folks who have a vested interest in seeing the status quo continued. And I am taking money from none of those folks. I'm not taking money from corporate PACs, and I'm not taking money from special interest groups that want the problems that we're talking about just to continue. So I think you have to start with looking at who are the friends of the people trying to get elected. And by friends, I mean who are actually donating and funding the campaigns. And I think that tells you a lot. And for me, it's my friends and family, those that I've grown up with in this community for the last 38 years. And for the incumbent, it's really the people that have business in front of the county. And I think that's a very big difference between the two of us.
Okay, I've done this a little bit backwards, so we'll get into a little bit more of your personal story next. But before we go there, what about private prisons and the criminal justice system? What separates you from the incumbent?
Well, I'm the only person in this race who's actually worked in the criminal justice system. I was a former prosecutor with the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. I'm an attorney by trade. I saw firsthand that our jails and our courts have become our mental health systems. Because we've underinvested in mental health systems and mental health services, law enforcement has had to deal with these issues firsthand. And we as law enforcement officials, whether you're a police officer, a sheriff's deputy, or a district attorney, we're not trained as mental health professionals. But because the county and a lot of levels of government haven't invested properly in it, we have had to, I think, clean up the mess. I think with things like private prisons, if you look at the current state of our criminal justice system, there's a lot of money being made off of criminal justice, and that's not right. I think that what we need to do is ban private prisons, for example. And I think when you look at criminal justice reform, you need to end cash bail. You need to make sure that bail bondsmen are not making more money than many different companies throughout this county. You have to look at the death penalty, the fact that we live in a county in California, one of the most progressive states in the world, and we are still enforcing the death penalty. I think is really grotesque, and I think it's shocking to a lot of people. And so I think you need someone in there that has been in the criminal justice system, that has worked in it, that sees its flaws, and I think we need new leadership. One of the first things that I would do as a county supervisor would really be to scrutinize the district attorney's budget. And what I would do is put in metrics of reform and success. And until we actually hit those metrics, we would curtail the budget, and the budget would actually be affected by it. Same thing with the sheriff's department. I think we need real reform in the sheriff's department. And to the extent that that reform and transparency wasn't being met, then I think that the budget would be affected. And I think Measure R right now is something on the ballot that's very important. I think we need more transparency. We need more reform within our law enforcement and our criminal justice system. And we need to build mental health institutions rather than building new jails. The current supervisor who I'm running against was the only supervisor to vote for spending $2 to $3 billion on building a new jail in the heart of downtown, rather than devoting that money into building real mental health systems and institutions and permanent supportive housing, which again I just think is another reason that I'm very different than the current person in the seat.
Any other points you would like to make about the race you're running for supervisor?
Well, I think that the status quo just isn't working, and I think we need competent leaders in these very important seats, whether it's county supervisor, whether it's the county central committee, or whether it's our state and federal leaders. And I have a track record of getting things done on a local level. I've been on the Sierra Madre City Council since 2012. I've been a mayor twice. I'm currently serving my second term as mayor. And our record in Sierra Madre speaks for itself. We're the only city in the San Gabriel Valley or in the 5th District that went from a volunteer fire department to a full-time unionized fire department. We're the only city really to have a full-service city and at the same time increasing services but also cutting expenditures. We are not raising taxes on our citizens, and we're actually making sure that they're safe, that their streets are being repaved, that the water is being delivered in a system that is 21st century. And I think it's these principles, which is just good local government that is going to spend money efficiently, but also protect those that are most vulnerable, like our undocumented immigrants, like those that are living on the street, like those in our criminal justice system. And I think that leadership comes from someone who has seen it from the bottom up, like me, who has done it as a local mayor, who has done it as a prosecutor, and who is a father of 2 young boys. I have a 5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. And I think we have to have an agenda as the Board of Supervisors, but also as the County Central Committee, of thinking about that next generation. Because whether it's climate change, whether it's Medicare for all, making sure everyone has health care, or whether it's just fixing our streets and making sure we have a livable, walkable county, I think that the next generation, those that are being born now, those that might be 5 or 10 years old, we're going to hand over to them a life and a world in which they live in, and I hope it can be better than the world that we're living in now, because I think it is quickly deteriorating, and what we're seeing is communities in crisis, and I think that we need to make sure that every decision that we make is with an eye towards that future generation, and I think you need people with a vested interest in that, in these positions, and I'm one of those people.
Well, I think that covers it briefly, but people can go to your website for more information. So in closing, look right out there and tell the people in the District 5 for the supervisor race why they should vote for you and how to get in touch with you.
You can get in touch with me through my cell phone, 626-616-2095, or my website, www.john4soup, and that's the number 4 and soup, SUPE.com. And I would love your support. I would love to earn your support. The election is just around the corner. You can vote via absentee mailer, which you can still sign up for, or you can go to the polls for 11 days starting really soon here. Or you can go traditionally to the polls on March 3rd when the actual voting day is. I think we need change in the county, and I think I'm the right person to bring it. And I think that we need democratic progressive leadership in the current supervisor seat. And I would love your support, and I look forward to hearing from you and earning that support. Thank you.
Well, thank you, John. And this is going to be airing probably in the next few days through the election on March 3rd. So starting February 22nd, you can vote at a polling center, or you can vote by mail sooner than later. And you can go to lavote.net to find your voting center. And please tell 10 friends to vote, and whoever you vote for, please exercise your right to vote. Thank you very much. I'm Karen Suarez, and thank you, John.
Thank you, Karen.